right. We are live. Stand by.
Hello, welcome. The YouTube live part is beginning, so we're streaming from here to YouTube, and that'll be beginning. The people can go on, see the YouTube live part, and this is kind of an emergency broadcast, let's say. This is our usual time slot, but rather than focusing directly on Haiti per se, we will, discuss Haiti a little bit later. Those tuning in will probably be aware that there were developments. I guess that's kind of an understatement yesterday, and we're looking specifically to how it's connected to the developments we've been following in Haiti with the U.S. aggression and imperialist onslaught. And I would say, unfortunately, it's not news that we're waking up. We're not, like the people in South Florida, in Doral, who are, out on the street celebrating. Right, this is very much unfortunate news that the U.S. imperialist machine is churning out. It's using it as a propaganda victory and pushing it all over the place. And Trump and Rubio are celebrating. And as we are broadcasting this from Brooklyn, they have kidnapped the legitimate president of Venezuela and are holding him here in Brooklyn in the Metro Detention Center.
The Brooklyn Detention Center. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're kicking off this live stream with that, rather somber development, but kind of looking to the inspiration that Venezuela has always had for Haiti, the intertwined nature of those two struggles, and not going to let, again, the propaganda and the projection of the U.S. declaring victory and mission accomplished, right, kind of be on a defeatist note. So I think, Kim, on that note, we can introduce our two guests.
Okay, and introduce yourself. This is Joseph Mullen, the host of This Week in Haiti podcast. We have William Camacaro, well-known New York area Venezuelan activist, and in Venezuela as well, and Saheli Chowdury of Orinoco Tribune, the premier Venezuela news site on the internet, in our opinion, and I should say generally on world affairs. Orinoco Tribune is absolutely essential. So thank you for both of you for joining us. We have the accounts from the New York Times this morning, the journal of record, as they say, which is filled with lots of crazy information. Let me maybe begin with you, William. In the New York Times, they seem to suggest that the acting president, the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, has spoken with Marco Rubio, and according to Trump, she pledged to cooperate, but her press conference was quite the opposite. She seemed to vow defiance and that they would mobilize everybody and fight off any future attacks. What is your understanding of the situation and the stability of the government at this time?
What we are looking right now is the consolidation of the new global order imposed by United States. They will use all the Venezuelan resources to maintain. So because what was in dispute in Venezuela was the new global order. We will have a new global order or not, and probably they will consolidate the empire with all the Venezuelan resources, and having control of Venezuela, they will be able to attack very easily Iran. because they will have access to the gold, to the oil, to the gas, to all the natural resources that they need, while the entire region in Iran have a military conflict. So remember when the coup d'etat happened to Chavez, against Chavez, uh, United States was very close. So we have first the coup d'etat against Chavez, and few months later, 2 months later, we have the war against Iraq. So they wanted to have access to the oil first before the war against Iraq. But yeah, that's what happened at that time, and the same thing happening right now. The same thing is happening. People are in the street asking for Nicolas Maduro and saying Nicolas Maduro has been kidnapped. We want to know what happened. It's almost the
William,
same thing. It's almost a deja vu.
mhm.
What's going on in Venezuela?
Just before we turn to Saheli, I should just say, as a way of introduction, Jesus Rodriguez, the editor-in-chief, as I understand it, of Orinoco Tribune, would have joined us, except there is a blackout in Caracas at this time, so he has no power to join us. So, Saheli, your turn. You can update us with what you know, even though I think you told me you haven't been able to speak to him for about 12 hours.
Okay, yes, I have not been able to contact. I would say I have not been able to contact anyone in the last 12 hours, anyone I know within Venezuela. Hmm. So we don't know what is exactly happening at this moment. Though last night. So last night Jesus went live with when he had a live on YouTube. He did a live on YouTube, and he reported on what had happened in the morning. Of course, mm, what took all of us by surprise, no, those who are within Venezuela as well as outside, is that what William just mentioned, that the planes were helicopters were flying very low and there was no air defense system working on it. It's not like, I mean, Venezuela is not a very strong country compared to the US talking militarily, but at least one would expect air defense systems to work, at least to shoot down some flights, some helicopters, something.
Mhm.
So I mean, till now we don't understand how it was possible for so many helicopters to fly into Venezuelan airspace, drop bombs, kidnap the president, and like take him out of the country without any elements of the military reacting to it. Of course, now we know that people were killed, actually, both military and civilians. Some people talked about 40 people being killed. We still don't know the number. That's another issue, that we still don't know the exact number of people who have been killed. Jesus is of the opinion that it would be close to 80 or 100. 40 is an optimistic number, he said. And it looks like there were like military personnel killed. We saw some pictures. We don't know if those are true or not, but we saw military personnel being killed, and there have been bombardments on air bases without again air defenses acting. So we don't understand what exactly happened, who exactly betrayed whom. But one is a real possibility.
Um,
I'm curious. I guess from looking at historical precedent, and some are saying, some referring to this as comparing it to intervention in Iraq, and I think from here it's feeling similar to Aristide being deposed. There's some
the kidnapping of
parallels.
Aristide on
Yeah.
February
In the
28th,
interview.
2004.
Yeah, especially the kidnapping
Sí,
aspect,
sí, sí, sí.
getting kidnapped and blown away. And one of the things that was, from my understanding, especially powerful that the U.S. empire utilized was just the fabrication of information, in that time, and kind of taking advantage of the chaos of a situation to basically defeat any kind of response that could be posed by a resistance, right? That kind of disempowers the people by putting out, this kind of false information. So I'm curious if you're seeing any examples of that already, of the U.S. distorting certain specific information that you know is not true, because a lot of the reporting that we're immediately getting from the U.S. Industry of information that is subservient to the CIA and the intelligence apparatus is immediately getting into the hands of people. For example, the right wing Venezuelan diaspora here in the U.S., and it's immediately triggering them to go out into the street and celebrate, and then they're getting interviewed on the ground in South Florida, saying how happy we are, blah blah blah. So it's kind of this like um, feedback effect of support for the coup, and then this kind of immediate mission accomplished kind of euphoria that the U.S. is projecting. So yeah, I'm just curious, any examples of that disinformation you've seen?
Yeah. Saheli or William, either one of you could take that. Have you seen
Okay,
any
so
specific disinformation in the mainstream press?
okay, one of the disinformation definitely is that Venezuelans are celebrating, because in Venezuela nobody is celebrating, irrespective of their political position, because nobody would be celebrating a bombing of their own country. I mean, nobody in their right mind would celebrate the bombing of their own country. So yeah, in Venezuela there have been no celebratory protests, or not that I know of. Of course, there might have something might have happened in the last 12 hours, but no, we have not. I mean, until then, we have had no information about any celebratory protests in Venezuela.
Mhm.
So the mainstream media, whatever the mainstream media is doing, whoever they are interviewing, etc., those are all within the US, or maybe interestingly, in Puerto Rico, in Spain, in other countries,
Mm.
but I mean in Argentina, but not in Venezuela, because I don't know what mainstream media is there at the moment or what they're doing. So in Venezuela, the protests actually have been in support of President Maduro, and in support of, I mean, against the US aggression. Whatever protests I have seen, they're all calling for the liberation, the return of President Maduro. So that is one of the biggest, I would say, distortion that the mainstream media is doing, that Venezuela is celebrating. And yes, I also saw news like that in different mainstream outlets. And where, of course, everywhere the people I saw, they are Venezuelans in the US, and it's like you people said, there would be right wing Venezuelans in the US. Even right wing Venezuelans in Venezuela have not taken out any celebratory marches or anything.
When Donald Trump is basically saying that they will run the country.
Mhm.
So I'm sorry. So I have to go. Some people are waiting for me. I'm going to another to a meeting, and I'm sorry for this inconvenience.
Okay, thank you, William, for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. Saheli, I'll pose the next question to you then. And thank you, William, for joining us, taking time in your busy schedule.
Stay safe.
Hello.
Yeah, the question, William, you're still with us, just so you know. I think
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. No. No. I have not seen it. Also, let me check. As fast
okay.
as
You want to try
no.
to,
No. 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 I sent it to someone that said that we would do it for me,
okay.
and I have not seen.
Okay, Saheli, we're now with you. My next question is in Cuba, as we know, you have the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution, which have basically instructions. Everybody knows where the arms caches are if there's ever an invasion, what they're supposed to do, how to respond. What is the situation in uh, Venezuela with the popular organizations that support the government, generally known as the Bolivarian circles? There may be others. What sort of popular resistance, if there has been this sort of palace coup, if we could call it that, what sort of popular resistance might we hope for or expect in the coming days?
Okay, you have already seen people. I mean, people are continuing to remain in the streets. So, and they have been in the streets since Saturday morning, and today is Sunday, so they are still there. So, and until now, of course, everything has been peaceful. People do not have arms in their hands, and contrary to popular belief, Venezuelans don't really have, like, a lot of Venezuelans don't really have arms. Although, I mean, recently there have been, in many cases, not everywhere, there have been issues in many cases, but weapons have been handed to, like, delivered to the militias and all. And there were, like, attempts to connect the militias with the communes. I mean, those things are in any way connected. I mean, the militia members are not just any people, like, they're the people of Venezuela. So the militias are, many militia members are also commune members, commune leaders, etc. So if the militia members have arms, if they have, then they would be in the hands of the communes. uh, and we recently we saw some deliveries. It's not like there weren't any. We saw some deliveries of weapons, but until now we have not seen any, like, people with weapons in the streets. And I mean, till now people have been peaceful. Till now there have been, like, all the demonstrations that are going on in the country, they're peaceful. So we do not know if, well, like, when or if the anything may turn violent, or if weapons will come out or not. Until now, nobody has attacked anybody.
Mhm. And what is your sense of the consciousness of the people in the street that there may have been some sort of palace coup, some sort of betrayal at the very top?
Mm, well, these suspicions must be in the minds of people. Like, suspicions might be in the minds of everybody, that there must have been treason at some high level. There must have been some treason. Although, like, mm, uh, most of us were imagining the treason would have been in the military or in the security level. But if it is in the executive level, like in the government level, then it would be a different situation. I don't think exactly this suspicion is in the suspicion might be in the mind of people, but there have not been any expressions of it. If and when, like, in the future, in the coming days, whatever we see, no, whatever happens in the coming days, depending on that, the suspicions might be strengthened or diluted, no, depending on what happens. Until now, there have not been any, like, anything like that. Yeah, no, nobody is talking about that, at least openly.
Mhm.
I'm curious, and I'm sure there are some statements that have been put out or posted around, but uh, the reaction of Colombia is particularly interesting, and I'm wondering on the border between Colombia and Venezuela as well if there's any development. But yeah, just for our listeners, first off, kind of the diplomatic response of Gustavo Petro uh, is something maybe to watch, and I wonder if he's kind of signaled either way that he's going to go on this one.
Well, so over the last few months, Petro has been, like, I would say his reactions have been quite bipolar, if I may be allowed to use that term. So sometimes even in his latest statements, he he condemned the military aggression, which everybody has condemned actually. Like, all the leftist governments of the region, they have condemned the military aggression. However, they have also talked about a transition, and Petro has been talking about this for quite some time.
Mm.
Like, over the past few months, he has said, Venezuela needs to move towards a just transition, that there needs to be a inclusive government, like, who, including whom, of course, he is the president of Colombia. He must know the oligarchy, the far right of Colombia is even worse than the far right of Venezuela. However, he has been talking about having an inclusive government, talking about a transition, and even now, like, even in the middle of the military aggression, when he is condemning the military aggression, in the same breath, he is saying that the Venezuela needs to move towards a transition. The issues in Venezuela would have to be solved by Venezuelans, in a very broad, inclusive manner, and these sort of things. He has been saying the same words over the past few months. So his positions are just like that. His positions to me seem very I mean, I think he tries to, like, he tries to be left, but at the same time he also tries to appease the US. And we can understand, because there are so many US military bases within Colombia. The US and Colombia have I mean, Colombia is like a colony of the US despite everything. So we can understand why he may have that position. So yes, he has been like that. He has tried to appease, he has tried to appease the US government, whoever is in the US government. And it's not like he acts as an anti-imperialist in the region. He doesn't.
And then the same question with respect to Lula.
Okay, so interestingly, Lula has not said exactly the same things as Petro, although of course, he has condemned the aggression, and he has also like called for the meeting of the emergency meeting of CELAC, in which all the countries participated. And it's again very interesting because CELAC is not a homogeneous body, right? So there are countries like, I mean, all the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean are there. So um, I mean, there are all sorts of governments in those countries. Some have openly supported the military aggression against Venezuela, like the government of Argentina, for example. On the other hand, Lula has, till now, I mean, although in the past sometimes he took a policy of appeasement towards the US by, for example, blocking Venezuela from becoming a member of BRICS, or at times he has talked about, similar to Gustavo Petro, he has talked about transition or inclusivity, etc. But at least at the moment, he has not talked about inclusion. He has condemned the attack. So that is something to say about Lula. He may probably realize that you know appeasing the empire does not work.
Mhm. Do you have, one last question, Saheli, and then we'll turn to Haiti. The U.S. is holding President Maduro currently in Brooklyn and is going to haul him before the federal court in Brooklyn probably tomorrow. What will be, how would the Venezuelan government respond to that? I mean, I know you're probably just having to extrapolate, but how would they respond? Would they send a legal team? Would they refuse to send a legal team because they don't want to acknowledge the whole illegality of the project? What's your read on that?
No, actually, they have said that it is illegal. I mean, the Venezuelan government has, uh, in all the statements, it has said that it is the abduction. It is called an abduction. It has not said arrest or capture. It says abduction. The abduction of
Mhm.
the president is illegal, etc. Now there are issues. First of all, the Venezuelan government itself cannot send a legal team from Venezuela, because when there are sanctions, it does not only mean that, I mean, even the sanctions directed against persons, the the what do they call, the targeted sanctions, even they prevent Venezuelans or the Venezuelan government or representatives of the Venezuelan government from representing themselves in US territory, or any other country that might wish to implement the US sanctions. So Venezuela cannot send a legal team, but of course it can contract legal team in the US, like it did in some other cases that were there in the US, like for example the abduction of Alex Saab, which of course which finally ended with um, prisoner exchange, but still there was a legal process in the US, and at that time the Venezuelan government had contracted a US legal team.
Mhm.
So that can be done. That is something that they can do, of course. And since they have said that it is illegal, they would definitely contract some legal team from the US. Now, as for the charges against President Maduro, of course, people say that they're bogus. Of course, they are, but some say that the the charges, even reading the charges, seem so bogus, etc. They do not really look like the language of law. However, I have noticed something, that they have actually slapped two conspiracy cases against him. Uh, conspiracy to import drugs, or conspiracy to send drugs, and conspiracy to send weapons to the US. Now, the other charges are easy to refute.
Mhm.
Conspiracy is something that is always difficult to prove or
Right,
disprove.
and it's
That is why
always a
they
political
put
charge.
conspiracy charges.
Conspiracy.
Yes, it is a political charge. It isn't possible to prove or disprove conspiracy. So that would be those two conspiracy charges would be used, I'm sure, to prolong his detention in the US.
Right. Well, Saheli Chowdury, thank you very much for your work at Orinoco Tribune, which we encourage all the viewers and listeners to go visit, especially in these tumultuous days. We trust that Jesus and the rest of the Orinoco Tribune team are safe and going to be able to join us again at some point soon. We probably will revisit this soon. And thank you for your work and for joining us today.
Well, thanks for inviting. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks so much. We'll see if you can exit yourself. We'll see if it works this time.
Yes, I can. I can.
It does?
Yeah.
It will exit. Good. Okay, good.
Well, I think we will transition now to talking a bit about the Haiti connection or perspective. Let's start off by talking about the kamikaze drone strike that occurred on Christmas Eve of last year. But now that's about 2 weeks ago that occurred, and 24 people were killed. We talked about this in our issue review, which can be seen on our shorts. So the reason we can kind of segue from that is that we have these escalations that are continuously occurring. A lot of last year we're talking about Eric Prince and mercenaries going in, and now we're looking at Venezuela, and it's very much a that times 5 level of we have been talking about Haiti as a rendition of Gaza, what's been happening in Gaza. Now they're going to do that in Venezuela. Of course, the difference in Haiti is that they don't need to kidnap the president or members of the government because they kind of have that under wraps. But the level of violence that's been directed against civilians, this escalation was particularly, shocking to see, because for a long time leading up to this happening, it seemed like it was kind of all bluster on the part of the U.S. and Trump is going to just do his thing where he issues out these random threats on Twitter and whatever, and puts bounties and stuff. And you were kind of like, oh well, that's just this kind of imperialist rhetoric where they think it's legitimate to put bounties on foreign heads of state, right? Mm-hmm. And from our perspective now, looking at it, the person who we could kind of compare that to in the case of Haiti is Jimmy Cherizier, the head of Vivanson. So I'm curious now with these kamikaze drones that are being launched, people might sort of wonder the steps that are coming after this, if something is likely to happen like this in the case of Haiti.
Well, I think it's for sure that all of the Vivanson leaders, and there's some 20 and change of them, representing different neighborhoods across the Port-au-Prince region, must be thinking about what kind of operations similar to what was just done with Nicolas Maduro might be duplicated to get Jimmy Cherizier, who is very much a sort of a rallying figure, a charismatic leader, we could say, of this movement. And even though some of the other leaders speak, Cherizier really is the spokesman, and he is formally the spokesman, and the president of the Vivre Ensemble coalition, which has turned itself into a party as well. And whatever that means. We expect that there are numerous, we at Haiti Liberté, even though we have no knowledge directly from inside any edifice of the government, but we presume they have rehearsed this the same way the New York Times reports they rehearsed the abduction of Nicolas Maduro in a model of his compound that they built in Kentucky. So surely they have planned for how they would go into Delma 6 or Delma 4 or Delma 2, which are the neighborhoods that Jimmy Cherizier frequents and often is, to try to kidnap him or detain him or kill him. So for sure, we know that the US has a tremendous arsenal of drones and surveillance technology and all sorts of other technology that they can bring to bear on the Vivre Ensemble. However, I think that we cannot underestimate the sophistication and intelligence of those Vivre Ensemble leaders who have foiled and escaped a number of such traps before. Now, I'm not sure that Haiti has quite the same strategic significance that Venezuela has, of course, and it was very helpful to have William and Saheli lay out the geopolitical and geoeconomic logic that may be behind taking out Venezuela before they attack Iran. However, for sure, Haiti is a problem for them because its instability and the possibility that it could escape from US, Canadian, French neocolonial status makes it a danger and a flashpoint, and is one of the reasons why it was the top of the list of what's called the Global Fragility Act, which we've talked about previously and written about extensively in Haiti Liberté, which was the act set forth and signed by Trump in 2019, which would secure wobbly neocolonies that could escape, similar to what's happened in Mali and Niger and Burkina Faso, where these nations have basically broken out of the neocolonial pen and established their own independent foreign policies and direction, and are acting as an inspiration not just to Africa, but to the world, as particularly Ibrahim Traoré, with his very photogenic and charismatic presence on the world stage. So all of that to say that I think some kind of operation, maybe not quite as expensive, not quite as developed, not involving a whole aircraft carrier group off the coast, should be expected, should be possible at any point in the coming months. And I think especially as the US ramps up this offensive, not only against Venezuela, but against probably Colombia and Cuba as well. And one thing I hadn't asked Saheli, but I think it's important to realize, is that I think a lot of the close security of Maduro was Cuban, and I cannot imagine that that if they were killed, Cuba is not only seriously angry about that, but taking a lot of lessons from this experience in Venezuela. So I think the Haitians have to take all of that into consideration, and I'm sure they will. When I say that, I mean the Vivre Ensemble leaders, and particularly Jimmy Cherizier. And I think this drone attack that we saw at the Minotree is an example of it. And again, for listeners who, because our last, we didn't do this week in Haiti podcast last week, but the one we did just before or just on Christmas Eve, I believe it was, essentially just before Christmas Eve, was that what happened was the minnow tree is a sort of, I could call it industrial park, is part of an industrial park that is just north of Port-au-Prince on the coast of Haiti's Port-au-Prince Bay. So it's about, I'm going to say 10 miles north, sort of between Port-au-Prince and the town of Arcaye, closer to the town of Arcaye. And apparently there was some sort of Christmas Eve party where a lot of young people were there dancing and, and partying. And 2 drones came in and killed 24 of them. You can see the pictures in Haiti Liberté, which we published, of some of the bodies laid out. So it was a terrible attack. Many young people killed. Now, most of these drone attacks over the past, since last March when they began, and again, this is the mercenary outfit of Eric Prince of Blackwater infamy. It is called Vectis International, and they have been hitting mostly civilians. And according to Jimmy Cherizier, and we have no reason to doubt him, because almost everything he says turns out to be exactly the truth, that they haven't killed any Viva Sam leaders or soldiers, but it is always civilians, innocent civilians, who are killed. So this may well be the case. We have not heard the account, or we at Haiti Liberté have not heard the account from Jimmy Cherizier of who exactly was killed in that attack. But in any case, many young people were not only killed, the 24, but wounded in the attack, which was at the very least, one could say, indiscriminate, because you're having a party. This is not like you're attacking a camp or a base or some sort of place where soldiers of the Vivant Somme congregate. This is a party. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of collateral damage and innocent lives lost.
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing happen in Venezuela right now. Not that, the civilians that are being killed are, as we've talked about, seen as not, perceived as enemy combatants by the U.S. because, of course, they're understanding that the population of Venezuela has been mobilized to defend their country, and so they're gonna, understand people as easy targets. I mean, you could look at the kamikaze drone attack and wonder, is there some strategic motivation of the U.S.? Do they do these things randomly, or do they, because they can then sort of say we can wipe our hands of stuff if it's an accident, like they, having previously bombed parties that we've reported on. But in these situations, they're using these things for propaganda success, even if that's just internally, to demonstrate the technological capacity of these drones to show that they're effective at doing what they're designed to do, which is kill. So that's more of just some thoughts on that. But another subject to connect, I mean, we talked a little bit about Aristide, and I'm curious, even more so looking at the parallels, that it was a little different. And I think this upcoming trial, right, that they're going to put, I can't even, imagine what this is going to look like, this kind of show trial that will be run here in Brooklyn to put, an enemy leader like they did with Saddam Hussein, or I mean, they didn't get a chance to with Gaddafi, right? But they're going to do some kind of Trump will, endlessly excoriate Maduro publicly, and accuse him, like you were saying, of every possible crime. In the case of Aristide, it seemed like the U.S. for a while was kind of effective. What they did, the coup that they did, was sort of effective because we've talked about some of the flaws that Famille Lavalas and Aristide had, and that there wasn't so much, because it was kind of a it wasn't really a revolution in the same way. It was electoral, and Chavez did an electoral process as well, but that they were very successful at demobilizing people by getting rid of Aristide, and that we've gone through. We talked about we had the letter that we previously analyzed of Ben Dupuy talking about how Aristide, in many ways, kind of did it to himself, by inviting the UN to declare a Chapter 7 in Haiti. So there's some blame to put on Aristide as well. And I think in the case of Venezuela, we're looking at like, wow, there's popular mobilization. So even if there's elements within the PSUV and the government that are collaborating, we don't anticipate that that is going to successfully end the Bolivarian Revolution. Like, they've managed to get rid of one person, but they haven't dismantled the communes, the popular brigades that have been formed. Whereas they, through years of neoliberalism, were very successful at kind of dismantling that. And we could, maybe anticipate in Venezuela that people will go underground, people will go into exile in some capacity, but there will, I don't know what kind of outcome to expect, but in the near to long-term future, but that there will kind of continue with the PSUV having, have achieved state power and having mobilized the country over the past 2 decades. So, yeah, any, I guess, comparisons that can be made, you think, between?
Well, yeah, I think it might be good to do, since it was 22 years ago now, almost 22, that Aristide was kidnapped. I should give, having lived through it and reported on it quite extensively, the story essentially of what happened. First, to set it up, Aristide is under a similar assault, multi-pronged assault, diplomatic, economic, as well as political, from NED, National Endowment for Democracy, operations in Port-au-Prince, and finally militarily via a force in the north coming down under the direction of Guy Philippe, a former army and then police captain, and a former death squad leader called Jodel Chamblin. So it was in that context that on the night of February 29th, 2004, the head of or the deputy chargé d'affaires at the U.S. Embassy, whose name is escaping me right now, but he was some kind of CIA agent. It's not Gonzalez, Ramirez. It'll come to me. But he came basically to read Aristide the Riot Act and say, we need you to resign and get out of here. And, we're going to turn it over to our NED established opposition. And Aristide said, no, and ended up negotiating over the wording of his letter of resignation, which we'll come back to. At the same time, he had many popular organizations, which were at that time were also called bandits or gangs, in Cité Soleil, in the shanty towns of Port-au-Prince, whom had been mobilized, but he was demobilizing them because he didn't want to escalate it. He was afraid, as he once told me personally, I don't want to go with a little knife against somebody with a much bigger knife. So his, I could say, prudence was unwarranted because he had nothing to lose. Give an inch, take a mile. And so he did not arm the masses to fight off the incoming soldiers of the Guy Philippe and Jodel Champlain force that was basically in the north and had gotten almost as far south as St. Mark. But instead, he, in fact, kept some weapons, and when his house was overrun, they found many weapons in the basement of his house, which could have been distributed to the population. So a little bit his temerity, or his, I could say, timidness in this moment was fatal to him. So there he was, and his compound was basically surrounded by a U.S. SEAL team, which had been waiting in a helicopter off on an island that was seized from Haiti off the south coast called Navassa, which is Ile de la Navaz, which belongs to Haiti, but the U.S. seized it under the Guano Act, which basically was where in the 19th century they said any island that is abandoned, that doesn't have people living on it, that has a lot of bird poop on it that we can use for fertilizer, we're going to take it and make it ours. The U.S. did that with Navaz, and so they had a helicopter out there on Navaz waiting, and then they got the green light. So they sent them in, and I spoke to Franz Gabriel, who was the main head of security, and he explained when he walked into the compound after Aristide called him for support and backup, that he had all kinds of red dots dancing all over his coat because all the special forces guys had their guns trained on him. So essentially, they kidnapped Aristide, but the kidnapping was done in a very sneaky and I would say deceptive way, because Aristide's idea was that he was going to have a press conference at the airport before he left, but at that press conference, he was going to do a judo move and sort of rally the population and leave the door open in some way or another for him not to even go, perhaps, or at least if he did go, to be able to return. But when they drove him to the airport, they said, no, there's not going to be any press conference. And they just put him on a plane with all the windows blacked out, with no tail number on the plane, which again is also total violation of international law. Every plane is supposed to have a tail number on it. So it was a big white, unmarked plane, CIA plane, some black ops plane, jet that they flew everybody, including his American, it was called the Steel Foundation Security Corps. So all of these guys, who many of were ex-special forces or ex-FBI, were loaded onto the plane as well. And they were all flown to the Central African Republic, where he was dropped off into the hands of a government which had previously which had just actually come into power 3 months earlier through a coup d'etat of their own. And so he was basically held there incommunicado. In fact, there was a delegation that I led with people from the International Action Center, Sarah Flounders and Johnny Stevens, along with Catherine Keene and lawyer Brian Concannon. And we went there and we forced them to give the hostage president, Aristide, a press conference, which they'd been denying him up until that point. So we managed to get that press conference for Aristide, which he could have and should have used to denounce the US more and denounce the various people who were putting in place a coup government, among them Leslie Voltaire, who's now taking part in the coup government, in the de facto government that rules Haiti now. But he didn't do so. And then Amy Goodman and Maxine Waters, the congresswoman from California, and a few others took a jet and flew to Central African Republic and brought Aristide back to Jamaica. But so there was this kidnapping also of Aristide, but again, it was a little bit like, I could say, a stiletto jab into the heart, because by removing Aristide, the whole movement was so concentrated around his personality and his charisma that it basically dissipated. And they set up what was called a Council of Sages. But before this Council of Sages was established, it was chosen by three sectors. One was the business community, of course, the church, of course, and then they had to have somebody with a little Lavalas color, a little Lavalas credentials to make it stick and work. And that was Leslie Voltaire. So those three basically chose this Council of Sages, which in turn chose the coup government, which the US had already to parachute in a certain guy called Gerard Latortue and a president called Boniface Alexandre. And the rest became 2 years of coup d'etat, which claimed many lives and was a terrible blow to the Haitian democracy movement. So all of that is to say that this kidnapping, which is similar 22 years later, of President Nicolas Maduro, I think will hope to kill the movement in Venezuela of the people that has been ongoing for the past 26 years, 27 years, since Chavez came to power in 1999. And I think, however, that, as they say in Creole, bien compté, mal calculé. You count well, but you calculate badly. I think they've calculated badly, because I think and I hope that the popular movement in Venezuela, as disheartened and is stressed and is weakened as it has been by sanctions and all sorts of other imperial games, that they will prevail. And I think at this moment, the Trump administration's flailing desperation in the Caribbean, blowing up at this point 115, killing 115 people, blowing up some 40 boats with absolutely no proof of anything, just simply asserting that they're drug boats, that this has so outraged and shocked and, I could say, educated the Latin American public, even though you have these terrible right-wing leaders in Argentina, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, and other countries who are pledging fealty to Trump. But nonetheless, the masses of Latin America are being radicalized. And I think we're in a moment where, just as Aristide's kidnapping in 2004 really showed the world and demonstrated to the world the, I could say, cynicism of the US government and the George W. Bush regime, that the same thing is true now with Trump. Trump is in many ways digging his own grave by not only betraying his campaign promises to put an end to regime change wars, but by doing it in the most ham-fisted and clumsy way imaginable, by basically trampling and offending Latin American sovereignty and dignity through his terribly illegal actions.
Well, I think we can sort of wrap it up there. I think, as a last word, I'm very, very hesitant to trust whatever the the sidekicks of the empire are gonna put out about this, especially in the media, just managing to always kind of manipulate things, and even a narrative which is gonna fixate and potentially even put the blame. And I'm sure there are ultra leftists who will, in some kind of diagnosis of this, look later on and find ways to blame Maduro, blame the PSUV in some capacity, just some way to make it the fault of the victim rather than the perpetrator. Even if that's somewhat, as we were discovering in this conversation, that there are ways in which the U.S. is manipulating palace intrigue or potential fractures existed between Thomas Sankara and Blaise Compaoré, and they were able to find their Judas in that situation.
Or in Grenada between
Maurice Bishop
in-
has that situation. We just talked at length about with Aristide. Talk about it with Toussaint Louverture, and go and find the ways in which it was the fault of the people trying to change the world or make a difference, rather than the fact that there was this outside force that is perpetually meddling and exploiting those divisions. So I think it would be important not to over fixate on some flaw which has already crops up. People kind of looking at the when Venezuela had a deal, I think it was like a year or so ago, to ease the sanctions, and kind of the U.S. was getting threatened by, as we were talking about, the closure of the Suez Canal or the Strait of Hormuz, right? That you could, overly and even I think maybe it's more succinct to say that there is always this critique that comes against leftists when they actually get into power.
Yeah.
In the case of Venezuela,
Well, it always comes from the ultra left.
yeah. In the case of Venezuela, we have a great example of the left being in power, and then there's going to be that ultra left perspective, which is looking at how that state power wasn't exercised properly and all kinds of things. And not to overly criticize people on the left who I think are just sometimes just kind of looking for some reason or some explanation for these things. But on the other hand, when you look at the people out in the street in South Florida, right, or who are taking any opportunity, who took opportunities to like have these pseudo inaugurations for Juan Guaido about 8 years ago, and celebrate Corina Machado and give her the Nobel Peace Prize, right? Who are actively undermining their home country from the safety of the empire, from the safety of the belly of the beast. That's far worse than going about. And I'm sure that there can be a post-mortem. That's too strong, right? Mortem implies some failure or death or something, but there can be these analyses that will come about. But I think to overly criticize Venezuela, and not, as you I think put it very well, Aristide made the mistake of not really putting the blame where it was necessary, and finding out who was the real agent behind the coup. So hopefully, I think we can take time now to look at and expose in depth how the U.S. prepared for this. Are they going to use the same approach? Certainly, they will, as imperialists to Jimmy Cherizier and Vivre Ensemble. But the more we can analyze that, the more we can kind of prepare for that.
And not arming the people. That was the big thing. Aristide needed to put his faith in people and realize that with imperialism, give an inch, they'll take a mile. There's no consolation. There's no compromise you can make with them. The Sandinistas in Nicaragua discovered this when they were under assault. Every compromise they offered would simply become the way to move it further along for their surrender. And Iran has experienced this. Any country who has tried to stand up to imperialism. And just on the ultra left, yes, again, it must be underscored, not just when they come into power. And the ultra left, of course, was hitting at Aristide all the time when he was in power about how completely deficient he was. And in many ways, yes, there were deficiencies, but you don't attack the people's efforts to establish their own government. And the same is true, again, of the Vivre Ensemble. Yes, there's lots of things we can say about how they should have this, they should be that, etc. But we have to try to encourage and move it forward, not attack it and stop what has been perhaps the greatest challenge to U.S. hegemony in Haiti in many, many, many years. So this is, the challenge before us now. Can this very brazen, illegal conduct by the Trump administration that is happening both in Venezuela and Haiti be tolerated, and can it be pushed back, and can the process, the revolutions in those countries prevail?
Well, thank you for tuning in, and see you next week for another edition of This Week in Haiti.
Thank you very much.